Hey guys, welcome back to the Honor You podcast. I'm so glad you're here this week. I am back at it. Last week I took a little break doing a mini episode because I was teetering on burnt out. I had opened up my program and it was just busy, busy, busy doing all the things, getting ready for the launch of the program, the Honor You Lab, which is now closed, which is exciting. But I will still link up in the show notes a place for you to um, grab a spot in the next cohort of the Honor You Lab if you'd be interested. So I will link that in the show notes. It was a lot of fun, but it was also very challenging. Just doing everything for the first time, it always can feel very overwhelming or just can feel like a lot. There's really no other way to put it. So I did a mini episode last week. So this week I'm back at it, feel energized and rested up. So that's really good. And this week I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of honoring yourself versus being selfish. And I want to talk about this because I think that people don't honor themselves a lot and don't go through the process of figuring out what that means or doing that because they think that they're being selfish, right? So they think, well, if I just do what I want to do, I'm just being a jerk or I'm being selfish. And I think that word selfish has a tendency to have kind of a negative connotation for us in life. And so I want to unpack that a little bit because I think that it can be one of the biggest reasons people don't honor themselves. And just as a reminder, my definition and how I define are you honoring yourself is this idea that we can pretty regularly, if not always, recognize, respect, and respond to our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. And we can do this without self abandonment, and we can do this without self abandonment as it relates to external pressures, like we're doing stuff just because we think we're supposed to, or societal norms. Well, it's normal or it should be normal to go to college, so I got to go to college even though I can't stand school, right? Like that wouldn't be honoring yourself. That would be just doing it because everybody else is doing it, right? So that's my definition, recognizing, respecting and responding to what you need mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually without self-abandonment due to external pressures or societal norms. I'm just looking at my notes here. AKA, when it comes to selfishness, AKA doing something you want to do, um, even though like maybe you shouldn't, or not doing something that you don't want to do, right? So, kind of just like doing what you want to do. And it's very much when it comes to, especially as it relates to other people, other people in our lives, like going to parties or, making plans with friends or anything in that realm where it kind of impacts somebody else. I find it and I see people struggle the most with honoring themselves when it comes to other people being involved. Okay. But I want to talk about my definition of it. And I also want to think about the reasons that we avoid doing this. And I think that if we can look at this in examples, it'll help everybody. But I really believe that we often don't honor ourselves because we do fear so deeply to be selfish. We're taught, don't be selfish. And it's one of those words that I'm like, how did it just become a bad word? I don't know. Like at what point did it just become a bad word, and why are we sticking to that? It's interesting. And just to kind of like give us a little bit more information, I did actually look up the definition of being selfish as well. And it talks about seeking or or concentrating on one's own advantage, pleasure, or well being without regard for others. And I think it's that last part that gets us. I think that's the part where it's become this negative connotation. And to some degree, when I think about honoring myself or you honoring yourself, to some degree, I do think that you kind of have to have a lack of regard for others. And not in the way where you just act like a jerk to everybody for funsies, but more so like in a way that if you're constantly worried about everybody else, it's going to be really tough to honor yourself. If you get invited to a party and you decline the invite because you're tired and you don't want to go, but if you were to accept and just go because you felt like you should, and you were having more regard for that other person than you, then you're going to be not honoring yourself, and that's going to lead to you showing up maybe grumpy, or maybe you say an off-colored comment to somebody because you don't really want to be there. So it can be kind of challenging to think about things in life without ever um or with always thinking or having regard for others, right? And so, but I do think that's what gets in the way of us thinking selfishness, or thinking selfishness is a good thing, aka honoring yourself, right? Or another good example I think about too is, maybe you've made plans with a friend, and the day comes and you decide you don't want to go anymore. And there's a lot of people who would, depending on, certain situations, they would just go anyway. They'd be like, you know what? I told this person I was going to go and I'm going to go anyway. And again, they go in a foul mood instead of just saying, hey, you know what? I'm not really feeling up to this today. Is it okay if we reschedule? So many people don't do that, and they just force themselves to keep going and doing and doing and doing. And I think that that's tough. I think that that's really, really tough to keep doing that to yourself, because I think it exhausts yourself. And then, honestly, I know a lot of people that creates a lot of resentment in their life too. Instead of doing something because they really want to do it, they do it for so many external reasons. And then the more you do that for external reasons, whether it's your parental approval, whether it's duty, whether it's I don't want this person to be mad at me, whether it's, well, I better show up to that or I'm going to be irrelevant. That happens a lot to people in social situations, or if they're if they're business owners or something like that. And and I think that when we do live our life so dramatically for other people, not only does it make us unhappy, but it can really build resentment. And resentment's a very difficult, kind of nasty emotion, if I'm being honest. Like, resentment cuts deep. Resentment comes out sideways more often than not. So, um, yeah, so another just kind of last example I think of this is also, a lot of people do things for family just because they're family. If you get invited to a family function, or you're expected to be at the family gatherings of some sorts, and we're so afraid to say no to family. I think family is actually one of the biggest places we don't honor ourselves. And it's not, I'm really close to my family. I love my family, but my family also knows at this point that if I don't want to show up, I'm not going to. And I love them, but I don't want to be there. Or maybe I don't feel like making the drive, or, whatever it is. But we just do these things for family. For what? For fear of being chucked out of the family? So be it. I mean, if your family is so aggressive towards you that if you don't show up for something, they're going to disown you. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that you ought to think about that and what your relationship is with your family members. That's probably a different podcast. But I do. I think family stuff is probably one of the bigger places that we get wrapped around the axle about don't be selfish and it's duty. You got to show up and you got to do this stuff, right? So, yeah, so I just wanted to have this conversation because I do think that it's huge chunk of, like, kind of even a hidden chunk of why we abandon ourselves, why we don't honor ourselves, why we like find ourselves doing a bunch of crap that we don't want to do. And then guess what? It leads to our unhappiness. And then we're like, why am I so unhappy? Well, because you spend 50% or more of your life doing things because other people want you to do it because you're afraid to be selfish. So we then have to kind of get to that point where we ask ourselves, so when is it crossing a line? Is it crossing a line? Is selfishness and honoring yourself kind of one and the same? And I would argue they are one and the same. I think when it becomes a little out of hand is when it disregards other people in a way that's very disrespectful. And I think that that's the part of the definition of selfishness that we need to consider. For example, something that drives me absolutely bonkers, you can ask my husband, he laughs at me all the time for this, is when I'm on a plane and the etiquette is to deplane the plane row by row. When somebody comes flying up from the back and tries to get in the front, it drives me nuts. Now, obviously, there's a caveat to that. If they're late for their plane or whatever, I get it. But you've got time. You can just say to the people, I'm going ahead because I'm late for my next plane. Or a lot of times the flight attendants will announce it, right? They'll say, hey, just so you guys know, if you wouldn't mind, if you're not trying to catch a flight, stay seated and let the others go ahead. They almost always know if there's a big chunk of people that are trying to catch a connector flight. But that just bothers me. I think it's disrespectful. Like there are people who pay money to have the seat more forward so that they can get off quicker. So I know that's probably a silly thing, but that's like, to me, it's just disrespect or cutting any kind of line, right? I mean, I know that in some cultures that's not as big of a deal, but in America, for sure, that's a big deal. Mm, it's like a respectful thing that if you're in line and someone else is in front of you, you wait for the other person to go before you do your thing in whatever line you're in. Um, I also think that this crosses a line or we get blurred lines with honoring versus selfishness when there's like a complete lack of responsibility. And an example I give about this is, and let me kind of just caveat this one with saying that I really truly believe that a huge part of honoring yourself is doing what you want to do. But let's be honest, there are things in life that aren't that fun, like doing the dishes or brushing our teeth or folding our laundry, picking up our shoes from the front door. And so I think the honoring you versus the selfishness can kind of get, lines blurred, or maybe it starts putting it into the negative or toxic selfishness when you are just completely abandoning all responsibility. And what do I mean by that? So, an example of that would be if you're in a household and you share a household with somebody, whether that's your roommate or your spouse or your children or whoever it is, and you constantly just dirty the dishes and leave them in the dishwasher for the other people to pick up out of. That's kind of having no regard for other people, right? That's kind of a jerk move. That's kind of selfish. I'm going to start calling it toxic selfishness because I don't know if selfishness is inherently bad. I just think it can be kind of toxic, like a lot of other things in life. But that's one of those things where you're just completely abandoning all responsibility. Or let's just say, you're driving down the road, and this is my husband's favorite. And people are, like you're a person that's cutting people off, or you're trying to go around people kind of dangerously. Again, like you're doing that thing where there's this hyper focus on self. There's this hyper concentration on self, right? Like, I don't care what all these other people are doing. I'm late for work. And because I have put myself in a position where I'm late, I'm now going to create a dangerous situation for other people. And to me, that's a toxic selfishness, right? Like you didn't plan well enough, and maybe you did, and maybe things went sideways, maybe the kids, but like still, it doesn't give you a free ticket to be dangerous to other people around you, right? Um, so the other thing that kind of silly things like, if there was cookies in your house and you ate all of them before the rest of the family could get some, like that's a hyper focus on yourself. You're not even thinking about other people. Or one of my favorites that happens way too often is in the workplace when we're selfish enough where we don't respect somebody else that's on a phone call with us and we constantly interrupt them, right? So that's a to me a little bit of a uncontrollable or hyper focus on self. Like I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I want to say it over that person over there. To me that's a bit of a bit of selfishness too, right? So if you're not honoring yourself for, fear of what others think, I want to make sure that's the thing that we kind of put an exclamation point on this because um, it's not selfish when you do what you want to do. It really just isn't. And the thing about it is other people are going to think you're being selfish and they're going to put it in the negative light. And they're doing it because they're trying to control you. They're doing it because they want you to do what they want you to do. And honestly, that is 100% a reason not to do it. Whatever it is, somebody wants you to participate in something, somebody wants you to come to a party, somebody wants you to volunteer with them, somebody wants you to um, pick something up at the store for them. There's things that so many people want from us. Or if you're a parent and your kids, want you to, you know, at the drop of a hat, come pick them up at the last minute when they didn't plan very well. Or, they forgot that they had they forgot that they had a project due, and instead of planning, they last minute, Mom, can we take a 10 p.m. Trip to Target or Walmart or something to pick up supplies for this project that I didn't plan for and didn't tell you I had going on. Um, so my point is that there's going to be situations in our lives a lot where there's another human being, another person that wants us to do something and we don't want to do it. And then we think to ourselves, I'm not going to, I'm going to actually, I'm too afraid to say no to this. And so, therefore, because you feel like you're being selfish, so therefore you say yes, then you start building resentment if it happens a lot. And this is just not good. And it's why I say it is so important to honor yourself because if we continue doing things that we don't want to do in life, it really, really builds resentment. And resentment is a very tough emotion. Resentment's a tough one. It's heavy, it's deep, it can create a lot of negativity in your life. And if you're doing things and then you're resenting another person, you'll probably start treating that person poorly. Uh, you create all sorts of stress and all that not so fun stuff in your body. So it's really, really important for us to, to be honest with you, get a little selfish. I think selfishness is good. I think hyper or toxic selfishness, not good, right? When you're wildly in the line, I'm hoping that we decide here today. The line is that you're disrespectful to other people or harmful to others just because you want something. Um, and when I say harmful, I probably predominantly mean physically harmful because, again, like, not always, I suppose, but again, if I go back to the driving situation, right? I'm late, so I'm driving at a higher speed. Not to mention I'm doing something illegally, but I digress. I'm driving at a higher speed. I'm weaving in and out of traffic. Like, that's a hyper focus on self that becomes dangerous to other people. And I know some of the other stuff like cutting the line and this and that, that's obviously not dangerous to others people, but it's wildly disrespectful to somebody. But just deciding you don't want to go to a birthday party, not disrespectful. That's It's not disrespectful. It's an invite, not a you have to be here. And I think too many of us get in this place where we feel like we have to do those things, then we do them, then we resent them, and then we've got this buildup of residual resentment. Yuck. Residual resentment. That's a good phrase. And it's not a good feeling. And then it'll actually make you unhappy toward yourself because here's the thing, when we consistently and constantly avoid honoring ourselves or don't honor ourselves, it's a buildup. And our soul starts getting that point where she gets frustrated because she's like, I thought I made it pretty clear I didn't want to do this, and sometimes that's in the form of feeling anxious about doing something, or sometimes that's in the form of just being unhappy to do something, right? So there's this buildup that can happen over time, and it's not good. It's not good because your body will start signaling to you to support the soul, and so will your emotions because, as I've said before, and I say it a lot, your soul speaks in emotions because this will when the anxiety starts popping up, or a higher level of stress, or snappiness. Sometimes we get a little snappy when we're dishonoring ourselves because I'm so sick of everybody asking me to do all this work and they don't do anything for me. Well, guess what? Like, you're the one who agreed to do that. And sometimes people do things when they've not even been asked to do it. And then you still build resentment. And that's just like probably putting into a bucket of trying to please others, the people pleaser, the constant people pleaser, the people pleaser, the people pleaser. And so we have to really be careful when we do this non-honoring thing, and mainly because we think we're just being selfish, because it'll pile up, it'll build up, and then it ends up feeling very yucky, and we'll get tension in our body, and we'll get stomach acid and stress, and our soul will start building tension between all of these, right? So that's when the anxiety and stuff like that comes up. And so it's really important to not do these things just because we think we should, in life, generally speaking. Because if we do, it just builds up and builds up and builds up. And then our whole system starts freaking out, and our whole system will start talking about it. Our whole system will be like, come on, I need you to pay attention to this. And it'll get louder and louder and louder. And then you can't ignore it. And I think a big part of this, also comes in when we think about, well, generally speaking, there's probably buckets, right? When we think about parenting, when we think about being in a relationship with somebody, whether that's our friends or our spouses or our partners, when we think about work, I know for sure I was not honoring myself at work. I wasn't saying no to things. If somebody wanted me to go, I went. If somebody wanted me to show up to a call, I went. If somebody wanted me to jump on a 9 p.m. call to talk to a client in Asia, I did it. So there was, and I know that's like part of my job. I get that. We all get that. But when you do it over and over and over and over again, even when you're like, I don't want to do this, 9 p.m. is my time. 9 p.m. I'm going to bed, right? But when I kept doing it over and over and over again, it caught up to me. My soul was like, stop. Can you please stop? And that came in the form of a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of malaise, a lot of like just utter exhaustion. So when we're not being selfish, AKA when we're not honoring ourselves, it's going to really rear its ugly head. And again, this isn't my pass to the whole world to just think about themselves and not care about anybody else. No, of course not. But that rhetoric is exactly what gets us into this place where we're so afraid to say no to other people, or no to other things being offered to us, or no at work. Like, I know so many people that they got so much on their plate at work, but because someone said, hey, can you do this? Like, oh God. And they do it, and then they work themselves to death, work themselves to the bone. And then again, we can go back to the resentment thing. They start resenting work. I don't get paid enough to do this. Meanwhile, they're the one in agreement to it, right? They're the ones literally agreeing to it and not learning how to honor themselves and just say no. We have to go back to like our, teachings when we were kids, and how you got trained to like just say no to drugs. Yeah. Anyway, um yeah, so I think that's the fine line. I think that's where we need to pay attention here is it is not bad to be selfish if that selfishness honors you, if that selfishness allows you to do things that you want to do in your life, regardless of what people think you should do, regardless of what society says you should be doing. Excuse me. Um, and it becomes toxic when it's everything is so self-centered on you that you don't care if you cut somebody off. You don't care if you pass someone in the line. You don't care if you just dump your dishes in the sink all the time, letting the other person that lives there take care of it. Right? So when it becomes disregarding and really the massive disrespect toward another person, I think that's when it becomes not great. But my message here today is I don't want you to not honor yourself just because you think it's selfish, because it's not. If you don't want to do something that somebody has invited you to do, if you can't take on another project at work that your boss wants you to take on because your plate's already full, if you don't want to be in that club anymore, if you don't want to be in that mastermind anymore, if you don't want to go to college anymore, like these are things that are so important to our livelihood and they affect our day to day and they affect our happiness. And when we're constantly saying yes to things that we don't want to do, our whole system will start chirping about it, and eventually we'll find ourselves so stressed out, and then we get pissed off at other people because we feel like they're making us do it. When in reality, we just need to tell them no. Or we need to cancel. It's okay to cancel plans, folks. And I know you planners out there hate that. Hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. And I get it. I really do. I'm a very flexible person. If someone cancels plans on me, I'm like, that's fine. And I know, and it's like one of those things. Again, like you just have to choose to not be friends with somebody who's a wing at Wendy. And that's cool, right? Don't get mad at them. It's how you are. Don't get mad at them. And obviously, if you have a chronic canceller, I don't know, maybe they're just not your people right now. That's fine. That's really fine. But honestly, like, stop doing stuff you don't want to do. That is like literally the basicness of honoring yourself. And don't, certainly don't do things just because you think you should, or don't, don't avoid saying no just because you feel like you might be being selfish. You're not being selfish. You're not being selfish in the toxic selfishness way, anyway. And honestly, I think if more people live this way, we'd be a hell of a lot happier. Because too many of us are just doing things because we think we should, because of there's um, external pressures and societal norms. I mean, that just is what it is. And honestly, societal norms falls in a big bucket when it comes to our family members because we think that just because we're part of a family, we're supposed to be there. Meanwhile, we go bitter. Janice says something awful to us, um, and we get pissed. It's just not a good thing, right? So we might as well just avoid it. I don't know why I named the name Janice. Like, if you're Janice, I'm sorry. I actually do know a Janice. And Janice, I'm not talking about you if you listen to this. All right, guys. Well, that's it for today. Go be a little selfish, okay? All right. Until next week, keep honoring yourself.